Ooh, that looks tasty. Welcome folks, Today the Hungry Gamer is back with another game review, and today we're talking about Run, Run, Run! From 25th Century Games, designed by Bruno Cathala and Anthony Perrone, with art by Camille Chousey. And I do apologize if I mispronounced any of those names. Now what this is a cooperative adventure where you are cat adventurers going into a crypt of evil dog mummies trying to get out with the treasure. And what's going to be happening is, after you've gathered your treasure, suddenly the mummies start waking up, and it's going to be up to you through hand management and tile placement and dice chucking to defeat the mummies before the mummies are able to get all the way to the treasure room here, which is their final goal. And as I said, this is a cooperative game for 1 to 4 players. So with that said, if you are not interested in how this game is played and want to jump into my final thoughts, then you would go to the timestamp on the screen right now. For those of us still here, let's talk about how this game is played. Initially, you will start out with your cat adventurer, and there's several different cat adventurers on this section of the starting tile, and you will have your stack of regular dog mummies here, and then over here you will have one of several boss mummies, and if you defeat the boss mummy, you will win the game. So at the start of the turn, what will happen is, depending on the board state, you will roll some mummy dice. Let me zoom in a little bit here, and I will just place this like so for now. So the first thing that will happen is you will roll however many mummy dice you have depending on the board state. So in this case, I would just have the 1. And so I rolled it and nothing happened. However, if I rolled this symbol here, 2 things would happen. All of the mummies on the board would move 1 space closer to this tile right here, and then once they get here, they would stop, and then next turn they would move there. And for each one of those I roll, I would place a single heart onto the sarcophagus like so. If at any point you manage to fill up the sarcophagi, then what will happen is this will flip over, and now you will have a mummy that's out there on the board that you have to deal with. And the hearts that you put on its back become its hit points. And this one would add a second die to the roll at the beginning of the turn, and this would mean I have to discard a tile from my hand. Now, I'll explain how you place the mummies in just a moment because it wouldn't make sense to do it right now. Then the next thing that you'll do is you will place a tile from your hand, and your hand size varies depending on number of players, out onto the board. And this is going to represent where it is that you are exploring. So just for the sake of argument, we'll say that I place one right here. And then you can move up to 3 spaces to get into the tile that you've placed. So for now, nice and simple, I can move there. However, there's more to it because there's no light in that space. So I would have to take one of my torches and put it in the space like so. And then I would draw another tile and move on. As you are moving through, I'm just going to place some tiles out here. And as you are placing your tiles out, you must always make sure that you're not blocking off any passageways. So, for example, I could not place this like so because there's no path there and I couldn't get to it. But I could do something like that, and then maybe the next turn I do something like this. Now you'll notice here that we have 3 different symbols, and this is actually how you're going to advance the end game. Of course, I should have put torches in those. And also, just to point out, if I had this situation here, and then I place this one, you'll notice I can move 2 spaces to get to that space. But since I have 3 different symbols in this little triangle, then I would be able to place one of these door mechanisms, like so, and then depending on player count, this is actually how you'll wake up the mummy. Once you have enough of those, then the mummy will awaken. Now, as I mentioned earlier, as you're going through the game, eventually you will awaken those mummies, which I showed you earlier right here. And what's going to happen then is you will place the mummy anywhere you want in your crypt. So in this case, I would put it all the way over here because that's the furthest away from the mummy's end goal. I'll also point out that when you draw these tokens right here, then you get to draw these little bonuses, and you'll get some kind of bonus that goes with it. The next thing I will want to explain is how you do combat. So let's just say the mummy was here, and I chose I was going to attack, and I moved into its space, I'm going to attack the mummy. Then I would discard tiles from my hand, and based on how many exits there are from the tile, that determines how many dice I have. So if I discarded these 2, I would get 1, 2, 3, 4 dice. And I would roll my 4 dice, and as you can see here, I did 2 damage to the mummy, so I would take off those 2 damage there, and I could lure 2 other mummies, 1 space. And this can also sometimes allow you, and depending on what you roll, you might be able to draw more tiles or perhaps activate your Cat Adventurer's secret ability. And I also want to point out that it's not necessarily just 3 different symbols that you are trying to get, because also, if you wind up with 3 of the same symbol, then you'll place one of these torch markers in the middle of the 3, and that will earn you 5 more torches. And that's pretty much how the game works. The only other thing I need to point out is when the discard pile is empty, it is empty, it does not refill. But that's pretty much how this game works. So what do I like about this game? The first thing is the small box, high challenge in a cooperative style game for me is awesome. It's just quick and easy to learn, it's quick and easy to get to the table, and it's relatively quick to play even if you're playing with someone that has a bit of analysis paralysis to them, because there's just not that many choices that you can make, especially with the limitations on how far that you can move without having to sacrifice some of your resources, which I did not talk about in the overview, but just something to keep in mind, that other than trying to figure out, well, which one should we go attack, you maybe discuss that and try to figure out if, well, do we need torches right now, or do we want to kind of go towards unlocking the boss at the end? Also, before I forget, thank you to 25th Century Games for sending me this copy so I can review it. I did not mention that earlier in my rules overview. Next thing I'll say is, the art's very fun. The dog mummies and cat venturers they're very fun. They're delightful. The tiles are nice and chunky. The dice are nice. All around, it is a really nice production, again, in what is a affordable and small package. So that is just wonderful. I love everything about that. I also love that it's harder than it looks, because you're constantly having to decide, what am I willing to sacrifice to do something? Just to go roll dice, you're going to have to sacrifice a bunch of your tiles. Now, those might be the tiles that you need to create the unlock mechanism or to get more torches. And it's always a hard choice of what it is that you're going to use in order to advance your endgame. And that, I think, is what really makes this game work. Additionally, the way the dice work when you're rolling them, you'll possibly do damage, but a lot of times you'll activate your abilities, which are very simple, but pretty different for each cat venturer, which I think, again, works quite well. Also, at the end of the game, you have this very kind of cool looking board that you've made. And along with that, the last thing that I want to highlight, are the torches. Thematically, that works so well. I love that some of the tiles already have light in them, but in general, you have to, again, take into account, do I have enough torches to let me keep moving on? Or do I want to risk taking the penalty of waking up mummies faster if I proceed without having another torch? Just, it really, really is very, very clever. And the way that the tiles connect with the different passageways, something that seems like it should be very easy and simple, sometimes is a great challenge. So, with that said, what are my quibbles with the game? The first thing is, there's not a lot of depth here. Once you kind of know the game, it's going to be that game every single time. There's some difficulty settings, I guess you can kind of put on it, but in general, it's going to be the same game every single time. You're going to get the same 4 regular mummies. They're going to be cycling through, always coming out, and sometimes you can just feel like you just can't get what you need to do what you need to do, because there's so much randomness in the draws from the tiles, because there are so many tiles that you're going to go through. Next thing that I'll say is, I kind of wish there were some more cat venturers, and I wish that there was some more of the different dog mummies out there, just to, now not the bosses, there's actually, I think, plenty of bosses, but just the cat venturers having more abilities and more options to choose from, especially because those cat meeples are just so darn cute. I really wish that was there, but I also wish that there was more of the different mummies, because as I mentioned just like 20 seconds ago, you're constantly cycling through the same ones. I also kind of wish that there was something a little bit more that could go out onto the board. Yes, you have the Ankh symbols. I guess not Ankh symbols. Ankh is a specific symbol, but you get what I'm saying. And the sarcophagi or the torch areas. And that's kind of all that you have. And so again, you're going through kind of this same cycle over and over again. And so it's at some point you kind of start to lose kind of the fun adventure, and it kind of becomes a mechanical thing. And when it becomes a mechanical thing, then it loses some of the magic, I think. But there you have it, folks. I don't have much to complain about with this game, because I think it's doing one thing, really, and it's doing it pretty darn well. I don't think this game is trying to be a tentpole game for your weekend. It's something you pull out for a little bit of adventure, chuck some dice, have some fun, and move on. And I think it's doing that pretty well. I think it is a very deep filler game. And so if that is what you are looking for, and you like this tile placement, and you like this kind of resource management and dice chucking, then you're probably really going to enjoy this game. So there you have it, folks. That is Run, Run, Run. As always, if I made any mistakes in the rules overview, please let me know in the comments the timestamp so I can get that in the Klingon subtitles. If you found this video useful, please like, subscribe, share, maybe become a channel member. As always, thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.